Welcome back, everyone. I hope that you unmuted your camera and your microphone and visited with people there at your table. Maybe moved to another table to chat with someone else that you saw. So please, make sure you get a network a little bit. That's why we did this platform, hoping it'd be a little bit more enjoyable. With that being said, we're going to get started with the Methodist Health System. We have the two Johns, John Brower and John Bowe, who are going to be presenting on data governance and what they're doing over at Methodist. John Brower currently serves as the manager of data analytics and interfaces at Methodist Health System. He has been involved in healthcare for 37 years, with the past 21 years in information technology and data analytics. Prior to that, he spent 16 years as a clinical nurse, including 7 years in the U.S. Army. I'm also an Army brat. Bachelor of Science. He has a Bachelor of Science focused in computer software engineering from DeVry University. John Bowe is the other speaker going to be presenting with him, and I've known John for a while. He actually serves on our NTHIC and has been great support. I think he's been on some of the educational committees or other committees in the past. So we love having John around. John currently serves the clinical data management and manager at Methodist Health System, and he has been serving there for over 15 years. And he previously served as the chief nursing officer at USPI. And he received his master's in science and RN from the University of Arlington. So with that being said, I'm going to turn the time over to John and John to present on data governance. I will welcome them to the stage, hopefully in a second. There we go. There's John Brower. John Bowe, welcome. So I'm turning the time over to you two.
All right, thank you. So hopefully everybody can see my presentation. My name is John Brower, Manager, Data Analytics and Interfaces at Methodist Health System. My colleague, John Bowe, he's a Manager of Clinical Data Management, and together we manage the vast majority of the clinical information, principally through our healthcare analytics platform, which is Epic. And we're going to discuss data governance, and we would make this argument that data governance is quality control. And our objectives for our presentation today to educate and provide some information about data governance and what data governance is and how that applies to our analytics environment. And I found this really interesting definition that sort of underscores what we're really dealing with data, especially with this new digital revolution that we're experiencing at this time. We have this digital universe where the amount of data that is being generated is dominating our existence. Big data is a real thing. And if we look at this, just in 2005, 130 exabytes, I can't even fathom what 130 exabytes is. But since that time, in the 12 years, that's expanded to 16 zettabytes. I didn't even know that term existed, zettabytes. It's a phenomenal piece of information. If we were to take that data and we would apply it to each individual, that would represent a little over 5 gigabytes per individual on this planet. So big data is a real thing, but big data is one of those things that's not really easily defined. But data growth is exploding. With the introduction of the semantic web. The semantic web is this platform where we have an exchange of data that is more structured than currently is, and the introduction of cloud computing. And what does that mean to us in healthcare? Approximately 30% of the world's data that is generated today is healthcare data. And you can see when we compare healthcare's data growth with other industries, healthcare is leading the way. It's one of the largest producers of new content today. And certainly with the introduction and with electronic medical records and a greater focus on capturing data electronically for a variety of reasons, regulatory reporting, et cetera, healthcare's data is going to continue to grow. And it takes the form of structured data. And, this structured data has, features, which are the columns, and tuples, which are the rows, and it neatly forms into some grid-like format like Excel or a database table. But it also has, a vast majority of the data we generate is unstructured data. It's textual data, it's dictated notes, it's operative procedure notes, it's written notes, it's digital imaging. This is all examples of unstructured data, and that's becoming a more significant part of our data world. And as you can see, healthcare's data, it's exceeding other industries, and this growth is projected to become even more disproportionate over time. One of the ways we see data growth is not just within the healthcare organization. In this day and age, there's a smart everything, right? There's a smart car, there's a smart bed, there's smart scales, there's a smart watch. Apple recently released their version 7 of the Apple Watch. That now actually captures the pulse oximetry of the wearer. And interestingly, that information is exchanged with the parent company in this case, which would be Apple, or it could be Google, or whomever that vendor is. But at some point in the future, there's going to be a desire to get that data into the electronic medical record. That's usually accomplished through a FHIR interface. But why is data governance important? I'll let you read this definition and ponder this. And for those of us on the call, I don't know that this is a surprise. If we were to take an honest inward look at our current data environment, how do we feel about this information and our current environment? What's shocking about this data? It underscores how little confidence that we as leaders in healthcare have in the quality of data. And if we don't have any confidence in the data, how can we really tell our story with our data truthfully? And this is a piece of information that has persisted over time. This is not a new revelation. Year after year, when we see this, we get the same sort of responses where there is generally a lack of trust in the data. And knowing this piece of information, that we have little confidence in our data, and knowing that we have this piece of information that has persisted over time, if we follow the writings of Dr. John Kotter in his 7 steps of effective change control, change management, this would be one of those parameters where we need to establish an urgency to instill processes that drive confidence in our data. And data governance is really that mechanism that does that. One of the problems we have with this particular data is when we use that data, because we have lack of confidence in that data, we start introducing guesses. We start fudging the numbers. For example, we put together a fiscal report and we're trying to budget for the next year. We may not have any confidence that, say, our claims are effectively collected. So there's a loss of revenue. So we sort of add that into our analytics to say, okay, we're going to lose X amount of revenue because our processes, our governance of that data are perhaps not as robust as they need to be to ensure that we get the full story, we tell the full story, we get the full compensation. And, this is my opinion, but one of the reasons why descriptive analytics persists in healthcare. Descriptive analytics is just the information we print on a piece of paper. It's usually very authoritarian. It's usually an individual that says, okay, I want this report to look like this. But in my opinion, this lack of trust is one of the reasons why descriptive analytics persists in the healthcare community. And why is data quality an important consideration in healthcare? It really is about life and death decisions, right? We can't provide care if we have no confidence in the data. We have some institutions, some parts of the organization, like lab and pharmacy, they have really good quality mechanisms in place to ensure that the data that leaves their hands and goes to the clinicians that are going to make those decisions is high quality data. But we don't really implement many of those same functions, those same quality measures as we do on other levels of data. For example, clinical documentation and bedside documentation. And another concern that we have with the quality of data is we have a lot of unstructured data. And the problem with unstructured data, especially textual data, dictations and things like that, that data is incredibly variable. And over time, there's inaccuracies and inconsistencies with that data. Most of the decisions we make with the data, we make at the bedside, or we make it based upon some information that we get in an Excel spreadsheet. But really, this is about telling our story, telling our patient story, telling the institution's story with the data. If we don't have confidence in that data, how do we really tell our story truthfully? So what is data quality? I'm genuinely interested to see how attendees feel or describe what data quality is. So for those of you not shy, just type that in the chat and share it with each other. What does data quality really mean to you? You can see here, data quality is about the planning and implementation. It's the establishment of those controls to ensure that we have healthy data, so that when we share information with each other, that there is a lot of trust, there's a lot of truthfulness in that story. And you could think of data quality as a diamond, and it has 6 facets. And these 6 facets are the completeness of that data, the uniqueness, timeliness, validity, the accuracy, and consistency. And I think most of us, when we look at data quality, we probably define it in a measure of one of these terms. But data quality is really these facets. And data quality is this process that ensures that the data contains the truth. There's that old saying, garbage in, garbage out. And it's an old saying, but it's a truthful saying. It's been known in data science for a long, long time. It's a term we're all familiar with. If you put information in that's not trusted, you're going to get out answers that you don't trust. And data quality is that process that ensures the data entered is not garbage. It is that mechanism. And data governance is the means to achieve that data quality. So what are these facets? The first facet is data completeness. Really what we're saying here is, how whole is our data set? It's really a measure of the detail that's collected in that record. When we look at the data, there shouldn't really be a lot of gaps or missing information in that data. When you look at the data and say you bring it into Excel, when you look at that data and you're going down a feature or a column, there really shouldn't be any empty cells in that data set. But how often do we pull that data set and we look at it in Excel and we see those empty spaces? Wholeness means that we limit or eliminate the spaces in that data set that are essential for our decision making. And I have a good analogy with this. We send information to the state about immunizations, and MTRACT is that product that gathers that information. We send it via interfaces. And the quality of that data is variable based upon a variety of workflows that gets that data in there. But COVID came along, and the state decided to use MTRACT as a mechanism to track not only case counts, but also track where and how the immunizations were administered. What we found during that process that our data had lots of gaps. It wasn't whole. And through this COVID process, we needed to make it whole because we were missing things like the county. That's actually not a required field reportable, but it was for COVID. We were missing things like gender because we had workflows through our ambulatory clinics that was not capturing that information. Race and ethnicity was an important facet of COVID reporting, which was not really a consideration prior to COVID. And the lot numbers became incredibly important. So there had to be tight controls around what that lot number looked like so that the lot number that was sent to them was accurate, because if it wasn't, we weren't going to get the immunizations that we could administer in our mass clinic. So data completeness is a measure of the wholesomeness, the wholeness of that data. Data uniqueness. It sounds fairly straightforward when we say that is this data unique, but it really, really is complex. It's a very, very complex thing to ensure data is unique. And because it's a measure of duplicity in our data. We want to eliminate duplicity in our data as much as possible because duplicity, when introduced into data, will lead to confusion when you have conflicting pieces of information. And this is difficult because we have different work groups within a patient experience that could have different means of documentation. So we move a patient from the ED where an assessment's done, and we move them to the nursing floor where an assessment's done, and the physician shows up, he does an assessment. We move them into the OR prep where another assessment's done. We move them into recovery, there's another assessment, then we receive them back on the floor and there's another assessment. And when we have these processes where we have this duplication of effort, the duplicity of that process, we could introduce variability, which can cause some complications when we are trying to sell our story with the data. Next, we move into timeliness. Timeliness is pretty straightforward. I have the data when I need the data. But the type of analytics we conduct on that data is that drives what timeliness means to it. There are generally two types of analytics. There's an operational reporting. And in operational reporting, what we're really talking about is, does the clinician have the information at their fingertips available to them to make decisions? This is that real-time information. So when we perform a lab result, does that information make it to the clinician timely enough to make decisions around that information? And so operational reporting, the timeliness of that data is much more crucial for business. Analytical reporting, on the other hand, do we really need analytical reporting? Is really that statistical reporting, that strategic look at the data. It's usually that look back at that data over a period of time, whether it's a month, a week, or year, or a quarter, or whatever that parameter is that we're looking at. And analytical reporting, the timeliness on that is not nearly as crucial. If we're going to do month-end reporting, obviously we need the data for that month-end reporting by the end of the month. But is it crucial that we run it, 5 minutes after midnight? Or is it even crucial that we run it in the first week? So analytical reporting does have timeliness concerns, but they're much less constrained by the urgency of that data is needed. So timeliness is a measure of, do we have that information? Is it accurate and up to date when we need to use that information? Another facet is the validity of the data. This really means that this information says what it should say. We have a series of requirements around that: syntax, is it a date field? Is it a text field? Is it a name, etc.? And that's driven by the type of data that we're trying to enter into that. You don't want to have a piece of data that says, okay, this is a date of birth, right? But what shows up in there is somebody's name, or some of the gibberish that doesn't really have any correlation with the question that's being asked. What is this date of birth? What is this person's gender? It really encompasses the relationships between the data items and how we trace that data through that patient's journey. So validity means that information is valid to the question being asked and is pertinent to the decisions that we make with that data. And one of the interesting challenges with data validity, especially in data warehouses, is when we take data from differing sources, is there can be a high degree of validity. There can be a high degree of variety in that data. And what validity says with that particular data is that all the data is aligned regardless of the source. The next facet is data accuracy. This is really a pretty straightforward definition, right? It's the specifics of any real world references that may be based upon the business requirements, and that the data contained in that field accurately reflects the question being asked. It really directly impacts the correctness of the decisions. And a good example is lab data, right? If we get a piece of lab data back and it says a patient's potassium is something ridiculous like 7, and we go ahead and take an action against that potassium score, but we find out that data is actually invalid and it's actually a low potassium value, we've compounded the problem that the patient had to begin with. So the accuracy of the data is strikingly important for the care that we give. Data governance establishes a set of parameters that help us drive the accuracy of that data. This is really a measure of the truthfulness of the story we're telling with our data. The final facet is consistency. And really what this really means, when I look at that feature, those features in an Excel spreadsheet, and I look from column to column to column, while the story from record to record may change, the consistency of the information told by that feature is the same. So when we look at a date of birth and we go down that column, we don't expect to see something that deviates from that expected value, right? So we would expect to see in that feature of data a date of birth all the way down the spreadsheet, or we would expect to see a name in a name field consistently down the spreadsheet. So data consistency is not only about the data meaning the same thing from record to record to record, but it's consistently populated from record to record to record. So where does all this lead to with quality? Because on the slide, we made this argument that data governance and data quality are one and the same. One drives the other. who is the data governance team? And there are numerous examples of imagery out there, but data governance is really this magical construction that adds order to an otherwise disorderly world. If we think about our data, this disorder happens in our data all the time because we have so many silos of decision makers around an organization. And oftentimes they're making those decisions in a vacuum. They're making it without guidance or collaboration or governance. And, they could be based around service lines or department lines or objectives, whether they be financial or clinical. The data governance is really more than just a meeting of decision makers that make edicts to the masses, that pass down these mandates. It's an institutionalized process. It's an organic process that's integrated with the business decisions that we make. It's a process that establishes rules that guides the organizational actions in terms of data quality and data capture. Data governance is really the mechanism, this magical mechanism that ensures the story we tell with our data is accurate, and it guides our decisions. It ensures that we make sound decisions because we have trust in our data. Who are the team members that are involved in data governance? And you can see, this pyramid scheme here. It starts with data users at the bottom. And if there are any graphic artists out there, I hope you guys forgive me about the next series of slides with my graphical presentation here, but I'm trying to make this analogy as it relates to the growth of a tree. So the data creators they're the ones that start the process in terms of data collection and data gathering. They're where that seed germinates to start this tree. And it's really the start of our story is through the data creator. Those are the individuals that do the data entry. Those are our clinicians at the bedside providing that care. They're our access services team that gather the registration information and admit the patient to our services. They're about that dietary department that does those interviews with those patients and makes sure they get the right trace. Data creators are really anybody that creates content into the system. And data governance really ensures information created by the data creator is complete. It addresses those facets that we talked about of what quality data is, which is completeness, uniqueness, the timeliness, validity, accuracy, and consistency of that data. Data owners is really a very confusing field. We as leaders, we tend to take ownership. And when we look at data ownership, really the data owner are the ones that make the decisions about the business rules that ensures contents entered by the data creator is of high quality. And in my opinion, this role is much more difficult to define than any other role in the data governance process. And a good example of that are an ED team, right? You have say you have multi-campuses, you have ED directors at each of the campuses. They may have slightly differing workflows, but are they the data owners of that data content? So would that individual be then considered a data owner, or would, say, a ED collaborative where we have individuals that have a similar service line but work for different institutions, do they then collaborate together to establish business rules, and collectively they become the data owners? So in reality, data owners can be individuals or teams who make those decisions. Those are the ones that have the rights, the authority to grant access and to make decisions and determine how that data is used. Interestingly enough, data owners may not be individuals who work with that data every day. It could be a C-suite executive that is a data owner for a particular line, or it could be a manager in a department. So there's a lot of variability in who is the actual data owner. The next in this governance tree is the data stewards. And there's this definition from the International Data Management Institute, and it basically says the data stewards is responsible for the management and oversight of an organization's data assets to help provide business users with high quality data that is easily accessible in a consistent manner. That's a lot of word vomit for basically just saying the data steward is the person who interprets the decisions made by the data owner and implements the processes. Data stewards, they're really the analysts that build our product. They're the Epic ED analysts, or any of us that use Meditech. They're the Meditech analysts that build our clinical documentation. Those are the data stewards. The data stewards really are the interpreters of the data owners' business decisions and implement that into practice. Data stewards in many ways are more familiar with the entire process involved with that data. Data stewards often know the journey that data takes from the time the data is entered into a product to the time the data is used. So data stewards are really those technicians, those people that really understand those needs of those disciplines and how it relates to the technology used to capture that data. Next in this governance tree is the data developer. A buzzword in the modern data world is a business intelligence developer, or a BID. I'm an old style nurse. BID still means twice a day to me. Data developers are and a lot of us tend to think of data developers as report writers. But data developers are really more than that. Data developers are the storytellers. They are the ones that take the content created by the data creator. They're the ones that take that content that is driven by decisions of the data owner and implemented by the data steward. Data developers are the ones that take that content and take these differing elements and combine them together into a consistent story that is then shared to tell our story, to drive our decisions. But interestingly enough, in the data developer, in the past, when we've had descriptive reportings, those analytics that are static on a piece of paper, data developer, the role of the data developer is evolving to encompass not just a BID, a business intelligence developer, but include data engineers, those people that manage the infrastructure. Data developers are expanding to include data scientists who explore different mechanisms for sharing that data, for telling our story. And data developers are an evolving field from, somebody like me who has an education and a background in data analytics and data science. And it really is enveloping individuals throughout the community that otherwise would not have had a similar background in technology. Data developers are increasingly becoming people that are more familiar with the business needs. They're becoming clinicians. Clinicians are becoming data developers. Financial analysts are becoming data developers. So the role of data developers is evolving from static reporting to more complex reporting and involving a greater variety of individuals. And establishing trust in that data gives those developers confidence that the story they're telling with the data is consistent with the truth. The final role is the data user. They really are the ones that use the fruit of all this labor. The data users is really everybody that uses any of the content to drive decisions. And when data governance follows a sound process that ensures that we have high quality data, then those data users will have confidence in the data analytics. They'll have confidence that the story we're being told, that is told with the data, is a truthful story. And so data governance is really this journey of this data from the data creator to the data user. It describes a process that captures facts and conveys truth. And from that truth, we gain wisdom. And this leads me to the final slide, which is, it's not a new term, but it's a newish term, and it's certainly new in the healthcare community, and that's data democratization. It's quite a controversial subject, right? Because in the past, we're used to these dry analytics, these static analytics that there are edicts from individuals that say, okay, you're going to display this data in this fashion and in this manner, and I'm going to share that data with them. But there's really no impact from any other members of the team except the data user that constructed that. So it's, descriptive analytics in that fashion and in the traditional fashion that we've employed in healthcare is really an authoritarian process. But when we look at data democratization, the words here are meaningful, but the image is even more meaningful. Data democratization is really this process of gaining wisdom from our data, from this journey that has been told with our data. And in order for data democratization to be effective, what we really need to have is a sound education process. We need an educated workforce that understands what data is. And data governance is a mechanism that not only ensures that we have quite high quality data, it not only ensures that we have an informed audience, but it gives us an avenue of communication where information is conveyed from the data users up to those decision makers, and it conveys information bidirectionally. It moves it from that executive level decisions down to the various data users and committees and data owners. Data democratization really is about exploring our data, questioning our data, and really finding the truthfulness in that data. And with data democratization, using high quality data, we can confidently say that I can challenge this data, and that when I challenge this data, I gain greater wisdom from that information. That wraps up my portion of the presentation. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, John Vo. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, JB. Before I go into this part of the presentation, I just want to say thanks to JB. Not a lot of people know I'm new to data, probably 3 years in to this data process, and JB has been in a lot longer, and he's been mentoring me at Methodist. So if you're ever looking for a good mentor, JB is the guy to go. I also would like to say that I want to thank Greg, Shelton, and Stephanie, Teresa, and Patty Taylor. Those people are instrumental at DFW Hospital Council. They're always answering their emails very quickly and getting stuff that you need pretty quick to your if you ever need it. So shout out to them. They're doing a great job. I sit on a number of committees at DFW Council, and they do a fantastic job facilitating any issues you may have. So I'm going to share my screen. We're going to go into a couple of things about the importance of data governance. Come on. Okay, you see my screen now. And so why is data governance important? It establishes knowledge. It promotes clarity amongst the data definitions, reduces data cost. It simplifies data systems. It helps resolve issues with data definitions, where the data's coming from. It ensures compliance, that we are collecting the right data at the right time. And then I'm going to share some things, share some roles and responsibilities of data governance at Methodist. So why is data governance important? Like I said, it sets the metrics up. It sets the processes up, the management of performance to continuously improve data quality, as JV spoke about. It gives us structure. It gives us a set of policies to follow to get that data right every time. As data quality people look at their processes, there's always things that we can improve on. Like, I know when we first started with our scorecard, it was very cumbersome to manually enter in a spreadsheet, and misfinger a decimal point or a number, and it goes out to the entire organization, and you're horrified about that. So this is what data governance does. It checks those balances, gives you that data quality. So at Methodist, what is data governance? What does the committee membership look like? We try to include everybody we possibly can that has touched data at the organization. We have finance, we have IT, we have clinical informatics, we have quality, medical staff, accountable care organization, revenue cycle, and nursing. So who are the members of those things? We have at finance, we have the AVP and the vice president of finance sit on that. We also have a manager of data finance. On IT, it's JB, the Cohido manager there. Clinical informatics, I sit on that. Quality is a director of quality at one of the system hospitals. A medical staff, that includes our CMO and then our CMIO. And then the ACO, we have a vice president that is also a physician that sits on our committee. Revenue cycle is our vice president of revenue cycle, and she brings in ad hoc members. And then nursing, we have our chief nursing system officer that resides on this committee. So this is an example of our data definition scorecard. This is our quality scorecard. We have key indicators that we measure every time, units of measurement, the calculation, how it's calculated, the frequency that we pull the data, the time frame for each time we send the scorecard out, descriptions of what that metric we're looking at, who the data owner is, and then our source of data. So that source of data could be Premier, it could be Epic, it could be Midas, it could be one of those databases, and we're trying to solidify that into one database eventually, and that's part of what data governance oversees. So, building an enterprise data governance program. We have foundation, building blocks, and then we have an analytics catalog. We use Epic a lot to help us govern our data governance team, and with JB's help, we look at these available tools within Epic to help us build this program from the ground up. And you'll see some examples in a second. This is our data dictionary. Epic has a great data dictionary that we use when we're setting up our dashboards, our crystal reports, and various metrics that use those analytics. And this is an example of it. Here's another data definition that we use. Within Epic, they have this, it's called metadata tools. And I'm sure that some of the Epic facilities are familiar with this. But what this does is it gives you what the description is, who owns it, who built it, what metrics are a part of it, who approved it, and when. And this is a valuable tool for us that we used heavily in the COVID-19 information. And you can see here we have these are two different dashboards that we used, and who owned them. And it was just a valuable tool for us to go back and say, okay, well, if someone had a question about where this test came from, we knew who to go to who built it and who to go to when we had questions. Another example of the metadata with data governance. You can see here, this is just a couple of reports that are being written, and you can see the content review, who owned it, the administrator information, and various things. So if you're an Epic-based facility or are looking at Epic, this is a great tool to use within your organization. And then here's the Cohito metric glossary. This is part of what we review during our data governance meetings. We look at what the definition means, and then we just pull this up on the screen and kind of go through the description of and make sure that everybody agrees with it. Once they agree with it, we have sign off, and that process goes into a build process, and then we put the metric in production. So we're still at the infancy stages, as JB may have relented to, but we are hardwiring this process into Methodist, and this is kind of our building blocks. And then we have analytics catalog. So this is any user can go into the analytics catalog and type in anything from CODI to med planning, or ED admins to mortality rate, and it'll pull up a bunch of reports that are associated with that analytics catalog search function. And then here's our references that we used. And we are going to ask questions at this point. What questions do you guys have in the audience that we can answer for you?
Great job. Yeah, if you want to post your questions over in the Q&A, please do. I saw that Mary made a comment on data stewards. Those are her favorite people. Do we have any questions? I really like the catalog option. Is that something that you got with Epic? Like a part of the Epic visual tools that they provide, or did you set up that catalog interface on your own?
No, that was a tool that Epic is available with Epic customers.
Okay. And so y'all go in and tie whatever reports you have on a particular topic, and they can search it up and find all those reports. That's
correct, yes. One thing I was kind of curious about is how many in the audience, just put a thumbs up or a happy face, are Epic based facilities within the audience. Okay, Cheryl, looks like you're going to Epic, and it's good. Yes, it's very robust. I've been very impressed from what Epic has to give us as far as data, dashboards. The dashboards are really a thing that my team has been concentrating on, and we've been using that data out of the dashboards to help with quality improvement projects. We've held system councils where we have 6 hospitals total. So we've had these system councils that look at data and they compare themselves to each other. And it's kind of competitive to say, hey, or, not really competitive, but I would say more of sharing best practices amongst hospitals. So when we look at LWOPs, for instance, in one LWOP hospital is a little bit lower than the other one. What are you doing differently? There's different staffing models that we didn't know about that people were using. So this cabinet uses our dashboards to share best practices.
That's great. So you're able to see through the data, you're able to see where someone might be having different processes implemented and see who's doing the best at it.
That'd be great. Yep, absolutely.
Are there any other questions? Y'all did such a great job. You really thoroughly discussed. I really like the committee format. It kind of reminded me of the NFIT, trying to have all that diversity on your committee. So you make sure you're not just one-sided as you develop these reports, because sometimes we get focused on what this area needs, but we don't think of how all the other areas impact that data.
Absolutely. And that was one of our things about our committee. We may try to make it diverse so that everybody is at the table. And then once we define a metric or a definition of a metric. Everybody agrees on it. So there's no question about if it's being released out to the CMO at Carleton, and they disagree. Well, the committee decided on it, and then I give them the committee membership, and they're like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense to us. And then, we don't have any questions after that. We had a tough time doing that in the beginning, but we finally got it streamlined. And don't get me wrong, we have a ways to go, as JB will tell you. We still have a ways to go with data governance, but we are sitting in a good place.
Well, we did actually have a question come up, and before I read it, I just wanted to say to JB that I really liked his tree analogy. And, I don't know if you've noticed, but the foundation has a tree for similar type of thoughts as our logo. So the question over here says, does the analytics catalog contain links to reports outside of Epic, such as Power BI or Tableau? So if y'all are building any analytics in other tools, does it link to those?
I can answer that
link to
question.
those.
I can answer that question. Epic has a product called an analytics catalog. And one of the things that analytics catalog has, it has this ability to share content that resides outside of Epic proper. That includes content like Tableau. And along with that, when you construct that within Epic, you can create the metadata elements that are part of the data governance process. So yes, within Epic, you can align those analytics from outside sources into Epic. And the interesting thing about that, you can actually display that within a dashboard within Epic too. So there's actually pretty good integration with certain pieces of analytics, especially with SQL-based database reporting outside of Epic. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, and it looks like we had a couple more comments in the chat. Yeah, Mary says she likes that nursing's clearly at the table. Our nursing informatist right there. Well, are there any other comments? Oh, it looks like we had another question come up. So let's see here. Oh, it just said thank you. So we want to thank you both. If there's no other questions for comments or questions, we thank you both for taking the time to meet with us. I really enjoyed learning more about what Methodist is doing, and y'all did a great job. So
thank you.
With that being said, we're going to close the event. We hope that everybody enjoyed today's sessions. What we will do is send out the link for tomorrow's sessions. I've sent out the link for the poster, so don't forget to go look at them if you haven't today. We're going to keep the session open until 12:30, so that if you want to go around and network with other tables, you can. There was a question about how do you switch tables. You simply double click on the table you want to go to, and then you can have conversations with the people at those tables. So please, if you want to network for a little bit, or you see someone who showed up at a table that you know and you want to go chat with them, this is your time to do that. Otherwise, we will see you tomorrow morning, and have a great day.